105.7, the vibes alive. Inner circles here, where voices thrive. Turn on your screens, let the magic unfold. Listening and healing as stories are told. Come one, come all, this is your time. No topics too tough, just heed the calls. From mental health woes to justice we seek. Together we rise for the strong and the meek. A safe space for all, let's lift every voice. Inner Circle podcast where hearts unite. Sharing our truths, bringing hope to the light. Community strong, we're never alone. Together as one, we've created a home. With laughter and love, we break down the walls. No topics too tough, just heed the calls. From mental health woes to justice we seek. Together we rise for the strong and the meek. A safe space for all, let's lift every voice. So join the conversation, let's set the tone. Inner Circle podcast where love is well known.
Good evening, family, and welcome to another episode, transformational episode of the Inner Circle podcast. I'm your host, Abe Kamara, and tonight we are taking it to another level, right? This is an episode for the bold dreamers, the doers, the risk takers, and especially those in immigrant communities who are ready to go from hustle to enterprise. We often talk about survivor, but what about skill? What about legacy? What about building something so solid it outlives us? Tonight, we unpack what it takes to start playing small and start building systems, teams, and vision that stretch beyond our comfort zone. Joining us is someone who knows that real well, Ali Moledina, a business strategy coach with the Kaizen Consulting Group. His team has worked with over 700 companies across the globe, helping businesses increase their revenue by an average of 41%. He's here to help us break past fear, excuses, and small thinking and guide us into a mindset of growth, innovation, and leadership. Ali, welcome so much to the Inner Circle podcast. We are so excited to have you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me here and excited for this conversation.
Okay, thank you. Well, folks, tonight the topic is from hustle to enterprise, scaling small businesses in immigrant communities. I'm your host, Abe Kamara. This is our usual business segment. Today is Wednesday, April 2nd. We'll go around the room to introduce our great panelists quick, and we'll jump right into things. Mel.
Melvin Lanozia, good evening, everybody. Thank you, AB, for that splendid introduction. Hoping to pick Ali's brain here tonight as it relates to a business. So I'm excited about the topic, just to learn a little bit about it. Let's do it, guys. Thank you.
Okay, Andrea.
Good evening, everyone. Andrea here. Looking forward to a very rich conversation. We are all in for a treat. Ali has a wealth of knowledge that he's bringing in, so I hope you all are tuning in and taking notes.
Miss B.
Good evening, everyone. It's your girl, Miss B. I'm all about the business, and so I'm excited to hear about what we're going to hear from our guest today. Thank you, and welcome, Mr. Ali.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much to our great panelists. And folks, you can join the conversation by calling our number if you have any question from Ali for Ali, 952-594-5154, or you can put a comment in the chat. Again, Ali, welcome to the Inner Circle podcast. This is a community show. Before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Absolutely. So my name is Ali Moledina. I am a business coach, as you said, with the Kaizen Consulting Group. An immigrant to the US myself. I moved to Minnesota in 2019. I used to live in England. My wife is from Minnesota, so we've done the first 10 years of our marriage in the UK before we uprooted and moved my family to the US, So I qualified as what we call a CPA in England, and I was an accountant for a while. I think I learned on day 3 of being an accountant that it wasn't for me. but I stuck it out for a while, for a few years. And then looking to do something a little bit more exciting, something else that I enjoyed, I went into small business. I joined a small business myself, which was like a really steep kind of learning curve for me. But we kind of went through this very accelerated growth plan of like within 5 years, we kind of opened 4 sites, and that was great. And as part of that, I went on a leadership development course in which I was invited to become a coach and a facilitator on that course, which ironically was my kind of side hustle at the time. And when I moved to the States, I thought I'm not moving halfway across the world to set up the same life that I had in England. So I kind of loved the people development side of things. So I thought, well, how do I create a business that combines my passion for people development, my financial background, my business background, and came across this great career called business coaching, and that's what's led me to over here today.
Okay. And what exactly does a business coach does? I mean, for the sake of our audience, a business coach, I mean, what do you do? What does your day-to-day involves?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, if I think about the journey of most entrepreneurs, right? We usually, most of my clients have gone through the journey of we're really good at something in our corporate world job, or, we have a really talent and skill for something, and we decide to set up a business in that, right? Either we believe we can make more money doing it ourselves, or we want the freedom and flexibility that comes with entrepreneurship, right? Or we're just trying to run away from our boss because they're like really mean to us, right? And sometimes it's a combination of all 3 things. And I hand in my resignation, and what happens? I'm really good at what I do, but it's the first time I've had to worry about marketing before. It's the first time I've had to sell. It's the first time I've had to hire people. And now all of a sudden I'm working all of these hours, probably making less money per hour than I was in my previous job. I don't have the freedom and flexibility, because if I'm not bringing in customers and clients, then guess what? I'm not getting paid. And the risk is I end up being the worst boss to myself, because on a Friday night when I should be with my family, hanging out with my friends, whatever I do to unwind, I'm thinking, oh man, when is that next paycheck going to come in? What's the thing I need to do to close that deal? And I end up being the worst boss to myself, right? So as a business coach, what I do is I work with business owners to really help them develop the skill set and the mindset that it takes to build a business around everything that around their skills and their core offerings that they already have.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Andrea, question from Ali. For Ali.
Ali, thank you once again. Thanks for being here, and thank you for that background and information that was really helpful. To kind of start off, when it comes to like long-term success and advice, what's one piece of advice you give to an immigrant entrepreneur who is ready to take their side hustle to the next level, but just doesn't know where to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question. I think where we start is with the vision, right? We start with the future, right? In terms of what is it that I'm looking to build. As an immigrant, we have a unique set of challenges, right? First of all, we're in a different environment to what we're used to. And we almost, I think for the vast majority of immigrants, kind of lead this parallel life, right? We're here in the US or wherever we are, but often we have family, friends back home, we visit back home. And therefore, the question I often ask myself, or the question I start with my clients is like, hey, what's the lifestyle that we want to lead? Because I create a business to fuel my life. And often it's the other way around, right? I create a life to fuel my business, which, can be problematic. Once I've worked out, hey, here's what I want to achieve out of life, right? Maybe I still have parents, siblings abroad that, I'm hoping that can join me. Maybe I want to be in a position where I can go back home and be in the US and lead this kind of flexible lifestyle. It's like, what's the lifestyle that I want? And that will then start guiding me in terms of, hey, what's the type of business that I want to set up? What's the structure of the business that I want to set up, right? And that can really be a great starting point in terms of these are the steps. So sounds counterintuitive, but actually let's go over there first and use that to kind of create the present,
Okay. Mel, question from you to Ali.
Yeah, Ali, thank you for that introduction and just hit it from the get go. I think with that though, there's a follow up question, right? Speaking of immigrants coming to a different country and trying to navigate the culture and understanding it and establishing business, that itself poses a lot of challenges to immigrants. So, how the cultural background influence business practices and strategies with immigrant community that you know of since you have transitioned from accountant and now you are a business coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a tough one. I think this is the one that I personally have struggled with as well. Moving from the UK to the US, I was in this naivety that, like, hey, they're kind of similar, right? It can't be that different, you know? But actually, it is. The way things are done in the UK, the way things are done in the US are really, really different. And I think there's three things that I think about in terms of how to navigate that, right? Number one is, what did they say? Your network is your net worth, right? To really go out there and meet people within your own community who are in business, in corporations, and all of these things, other professionals, but also outside of your community, to take that step and be like, hey, who else is doing this outside of my circle already, and get connected with them. And there's a number of ways to do that: networking events, chamber events, educational things that happen, right? There's constantly things that we can go to, and it sounds simple, but it's daunting, right? It's daunting going into this new environment where I feel like I don't belong. But I think just turn up, and I think I'm often pleasantly surprised at actually how much people are willing to have that conversation. The second thing is, being based here in Minnesota, Chamber of Commerce's, the state, different cities often set up things around, hey, how do we get state contracts? How do we get city contracts? Even if it doesn't feel relevant to you, go in, because over there you find two sets of people. Number one, kind of other ambitious business owners, but people who are familiar with the business environment in that the state that you're operating within. And the third thing is, just go out there and make some mistakes. Go out there, do some stuff, trial and error. Listen, I think as business owners, we need to get used to messing up more often than not. But that's part of the process as an entrepreneur. So they're the three very, I think, practical things that we can do. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah,
It
that's
does.
good. That's good. Miss Mel, any follow-up question for you, or I can go to Miss B?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
good?
Let me throw this since you kind of talk about it. So taking
Okay.
risk is another key piece, right? You mentioned you were working in an industry, you were an accountant, and you decided to switch career, right? I think that can be challenging if it depends on how you approach it. Now, someone who have worked for 10 years, for example, like you, and saying, I want to switch path, I want to become like help people and also make money for myself and make profit, right? What are other ways you think you can best approach that to not fail terribly and be like, I don't want to do that. Yeah, like you said, it's good to try and error. That's how you learn. It's good to fail. That's how you learn. But then sometimes failure can be detrimental depending on how it is. You can
Yeah.
fail and kind of move on. How do you navigate that as well, knowing that you're transitioning from something else and you're taking on something completely different from what you are used to, and taking on a different career path or owning a business.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I think there's a perception sometimes that entrepreneurs are sometimes a little bit reckless, and we get lucky through hard work, right? Which is sometimes true, but I think a true entrepreneur, or some of the best entrepreneurs, they don't take risks; they take calculated risks,
Okay.
right? And there's a difference there. So what do I mean by that? Hey, if I've been in a certain career for 10 plus years, means I'm probably pretty established, right? What's the financial commitments I have? What's the things that I've got going around me? Who's relying on me for that income, right? And now when I'm switching business, what am I doing? Am I doing something that's related to my field? Well, that reduces the risk a bit, right? Is it something that's totally different and I have no knowledge about? Well, that increases the risk a little bit. Okay, well, if we're going for this heightened risk, what are the things that I can do that I can navigate that, right? I'm speaking to somebody right now who's similar background to me, CPA, looking to change. And we're like, okay, if this goes horribly wrong, we typically know there's like a 3-year window that we can go back into this industry, right? Beyond 3 years, then we know actually that's going to be a little bit harder. But what are the other things we can put in place in terms of, if I need to invest money, are there cheap ways I can fund that? Are there alternative ways that it doesn't take a strain on my cash flow? So there are, we're looking at what's the risk and how can we reduce it? We can never eliminate, but how can we reduce or manage that risk? And I think that's the skill of an entrepreneur in order to do that,
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that. Ms. B, finally, let's go.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ali. So I want to know, what are your typical clients look like, or what are you finding to be the industry most favorable for the folks that you're working with?
Yeah. Okay, great. I'm pretty industry agnostic, right? So I work across a number of different industries, but typically the vast majority of my clients are service-based businesses, right? So examples are, just because of my background, CPA, bookkeepers, have law firms, personal trainers, people who have opened gyms, IT service companies. So there's like a real kind of range there, DEI consultants, and things like that. So very much service-based businesses. And it's really the economy that we live in now, right? It's now is a better time than any to be able to really build and scale a service-based business, which is like really exciting. And yet most of the business knowledge we have has often been around how to sell products, right? If you open up a sales book, sales 101, what do they say? Sell me this pen, right? But we're not on products now. And now most of us as small business owners are selling services. And when I'm selling myself, my own services, that brings its own set of challenges of self-worth, confidence, all of these types of things. And that's really a lot of kind of fun that I have with my clients. And second of all, there's a perception that it's we can't scale service-based businesses, right? Because I feel like I am the product or I am the service. And I love playing with that and challenging my clients in terms of, hey, how do we build this out that scales beyond us?
Okay. Well, thanks for that. It's like, if you can break it down a little bit for the sake of our audience out there, right? Scaling, right? What does scaling mean? Right? How will you define business scaling, right? Because like in the immigrant community, to me, it has to be a mindset shift, right? If I have my little hustle, I have it out there, I'm comfortable. But what does scaling mean, right? How do I scale that to reach, to become something not just serving few folks?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I think that's absolutely fine, right? If I'm happy, if I've built a business around me and it's making me a good income and I have a great life and I do all of the things and I enjoy what I do, that's absolutely phenomenal and amazing. And there's a second step to that if you do want to take it further in terms of how do I build a business where two things are happening. Number one, it's not so reliant on me, right? Because if the business is reliant on me and something happens in my life, hey, maybe I need to go to England for a few months to look after elderly parents, right? Maybe I get sick and I can't work. If the business is reliant on me, then the risk is that actually now my income stops coming. That's the first thing. The second thing is, how do I build a business where I can create intergenerational wealth, right? One of the things, to be honest, that can hold us back as immigrants, right? I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but typically immigrants have less of the intergenerational wealth as our peers do, who have kind of been born and have had previous generations in the same country, right? And intergenerational wealth, what do we mean by that? Either it's a business that I can hand down to my children, or it's a business that I can exit at a profit, and that creates money that I can either invest or again hand down to future generations.
Okay.
So they're the two things we're thinking about when we're looking to scale.
Okay. Well, folks, tonight we are discussing from hustle to enterprise, scaling small business in immigrant communities, and we have Ali Moledina with us. It's a business strategy coach and is giving us some great tips, great information. So you can join the conversation by calling our number if you have a question from Ali, 952-594-5154, or you can put a comment in the chat. Mel, question.
Yeah, yeah, Ali. Thank you so much. Another question, though. Business is all about identifying a problem, like you mentioned, having service-based businesses, identifying a problem and trying to solve it. Now, there's someone who have worked and identified issues within the area that they kind of think they want to kind of navigate their business at. But sometimes it can be challenging looking for that capital, right? Getting the money and trying to invest and get started. Are there ways or resources out there that people can navigate through? You have an idea, great business idea, but getting started is a problem. What are some of the resources out there that they can kind of tap in to bring those ideas to life?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I think there's three things we can think about. Number one is my personal network. I'm actually often blown away by the amount of money that I'm surrounded with that I don't even know about. Right? What do I mean by that? In terms of, look, sometimes it's hard when we go down these official channels of bank loans, things like that, particularly for immigrants. It's tough. It's bureaucratic. There's lots of paperwork. There's lots of checks. And sometimes we don't pass them because we haven't been in the country for long enough, right? However, right, and this is, I think, one of the beauties about immigrant communities, particularly if I move somewhere where there's already an established immigrant community of my background. There are people who have done it. There are people who have built successful businesses, built up wealth, and are looking to support people. Right now, does that mean that the first time I meet that person and say, "Hey, I've got this idea, will you invest?" Probably not, but that's where relationship building comes in. If I see Mel and I've interacted with him and I see he's hardworking, he's passionate, he's got drive, he's ethical, and all of the things, when that idea comes and the conversation happens, and I can be like, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking about. Who do you know that's also excited about this and would be willing to invest?" Right? And sometimes it's not capital that they're investing, right? Sometimes it's knowledge, sometimes it's their time and energy. I think it's really surprising. I'm often surprised at the doors that open up around me. Either somebody says, "Hey, I know somebody actually who's really interested in this. Let me introduce you." Or, "Do you know what? I'm actually looking to do something myself with some money I have tucked away." And you're like, "Oh, okay." And I think that's why relationships, any business deal, the biggest business contracts that I have won personally, or investment that I have received personally, have come from personal relationships. But not personal relationships that started in that conversation, personal relationships that were 5-10 years in the making, but happened to be here. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think we are fortunate here in Minnesota, up until now. I don't know with the current situation, but up until now, where we've had a lot of support for minority-owned businesses, right? Grants, funding, all of these things. Look, I think we've all known that these things don't last forever, and it may be coming towards the end of us significantly reducing, but they're still out there, and we should make opportunities of them through the cities and the states that we live in.
Okay. Okay. Andrea, question from you to Ali.
Ali, thank you again for dropping all these gems. I have a page full of notes. I feel like every time I'm on one of your webinars, I learn so much. So I'm just taking it all in.
Thank you very much.
Just to kind of piggyback off of Mel's question around kind of like the challenges and barriers, were there any cultural or systemic barriers that you had to navigate? And what advice do you have for others facing similar challenges as they're like building their businesses?
Yeah, so I think the place where in Minnesota over here, I think it's different to the environment that I grew up in. A few smiles. I think people know where we're going with this, right? But hey, I think Minnesota has a reputation for if you're from Minnesota, you grew up in Minnesota, it's a very tight inner circle, if you like, and then to come into that is tough. It's challenging, and it's not as diverse as is the Californias, the New Yorks of the world. People aren't used to kind of having new people here, and I think that has been a challenge, quite frankly, right? I was surprised when I first started the business how much easier, to be honest, it was to get clients from outside of my home state, and I'm fortunate that I can run a virtual business than it was kind of inside. But I think relationship building takes time, building trust takes time, and often we need to give that trust as well before we receive it, right? So they call it kind of like depositing those elements of trust, kind of showing up consistently, going out of your way to kind of like meet people, building those relationships, I think is really, really important and tough. Like it's simple. What's the right wording here? It's simple, but it's not easy, right? What we mean by that is that it's not a complicated process, but it's a tough one. It's hard. It takes a long time. And that's something that has been a challenge, continues to be a bit of a challenge, to be honest. But I would recommend anybody to read the book Key Person of Influence by Daniel Priestley. He was a guy from Australia who moved to London, built a very successful business, and he talks about this, how he really embedded himself within the London business community, and has built several kind of £1 million businesses.
What's the name of the book again?
Key Person of Influence.
Key Person of
Key
Influence.
person of it.
Great.
Okay, Ms. B. Oh yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Follow up question.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing that information. So as a multi-business owner, one of the things that has helped me, gain access to resources is being a certified minority business, or, we have different certifications rather. Can you talk a little bit about, like at a high level, about the importance of that and like what that does for businesses? Because I struggle with trying to get folks like around me, like other business owners, to understand like the power of that. And like you said, Minnesota is a little different, right? It's kind of, either who you know, or some of these resources are set up for you. But I just feel like sometimes we as immigrants or even people of color, we don't take advantage of those, and they don't recognize that these are things that could actually get you contracts with federal or government businesses, but they don't see that. Yeah, it's a little bit of paperwork, but can you just talk a little bit about like how like helpful that is?
Absolutely. And I'm really glad kind of you brought this up, because this is kind of like step one with clients that I work with in doing this, right? The analogy that I give, and it's not unique to Minnesota, it's all over the world, in terms of there used to be a time where big business deals were only done on golf courses. Right? What do I mean by that? Because maybe not literally on golf courses, but pretty much like I was able to get big contracts based solely on who I knew. Still the case to a certain extent, but what that means is what? That actually, if I'm immigrant in a new country, my network is pretty limited, and if I'm probably not going to get that contract. But if I've grown up and guess what, my dad is CEO of some company and he's really well connected, then guess what, he introduces his son, and actually we have some really great kind of business deals happening, right? However, now the city of Minneapolis, large corporations that are based here in Minnesota actually have targets that X% of their business should be done with, number one, small business owners, number two, diversified business owners, right? So minority business owners, women-owned business owners. And therefore, if we can certify as whichever category we fall under, what that allows us to do is like have like 3, 4, 5 steps in the door that we wouldn't necessarily have access to these contracts. And the fact that these cities, these corporations are required, or have a target, I should say, to do business with minority business owners, we can get some really, really nice juicy contracts from this, you know, and it can really lead somewhere. I have a client who got a contract with a police department through this, one of the biggest contracts that they had ever received. So, you know, it's really important. And for me, there's nothing to lose, right? Yes, it's a few hours maybe of filling out paperwork, but that's all it is. The gains are just so much higher. So I appreciate kind of bringing that up.
Okay, Miss B, question from you.
I am taking in all of this. So for me, it's like, okay, you're a business coach. Still, I know our folks are watching, like, what exactly does that entail? And so what I would like for you to do is kind of describe your process, right? When you come across a new client, what is your process? Are you coaching them as far as a business plan? Are you coaching them as far as operations, infrastructure, the HR? What is your process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate you asking the question. So first of all, we do a deep dive into the business and we're identifying two things. What's the profit potential and what's the current challenges that they are facing, right? Once we do that, there's really a few areas we can work on. Number one is finance and growth. So finance and growth is, how do I get a consistent set of leads coming into my business, right? Once I'm getting those leads, how am I turning those leads into paying customers, right? So i.e. that sales. And once that money is coming in, how am I using that money to grow that business, right? So it's everything to do with the money side of the business. And that's usually where we'll start. So like step one is like, what do we need to do to make sure we're meeting the business owner's kind of income goals, financial goals? And as we're doing this, then there's a dance between two things. Number one is operations and scale, right? So the example that I often give with operations is, you know, if I was to ask you, Miss B, to rate the quality of a burger from McDonald's, 0 being not a very good burger or not the best burger or terrible burger, 10 being the most amazing burger you could ever eat, what rating would you give it? Gonna put you on
Because
this.
I'm not a burger eater, I'll try to be reasonable, maybe a 7.
Okay, 7. Okay, so 7 is that. Anybody else want to chip in here? What rating would other people give it?
So what, McDonald's?
Yeah.
McDonald's, I'll give McDonald's 1.5.
Okay,
1.5.
1.5. Okay. And
And
it's
I would do
0.
I
5.
give it a 0 because of the pink
5. All right,
slime.
so we've got
And
everything from a
Yeah,
I
0.
was trying to be nice.
Yeah,
Trying to be nice. We've got everything from a 0 to a 7, right? Let's take the average of 5. So what we all agree on is McDonald's don't sell the best quality burger in the world, right? But yet they sell the most amount of burgers in the world, right? Like, how does that work? Because Business 101 says, what, have a really good product or service and everybody will come. McDonald's kind of show us, actually, you can have a pretty shitty product or service and customers will still come, right? Excuse the language. But what McDonald's have is consistency. Whether I'm in Minnesota, whether I'm in New York, whether I'm in London, right? When I go to McDonald's, the taste is the same, the smell is the same, the service is the same. I know what I'm going to get, right? The challenge with small business is that when I'm small, any customer client that comes to me, I know they're going to get a great product and service. But what happens when my business goes from 5 clients to 50 clients to 500 clients? Now I'm kind of going up and down over here. And that's the importance of having solid business operations to create that consistency. So once we're growing, once we've got the business off the ground, we're growing, we're putting in things to make sure consistency in operations, and combined with having the right people in the right places to be able to execute those operations. So it's this dance between, procedures and people, if you like. And therefore, that's how I work with clients. So I sit down with them. We sit down, we spend half a day, full day, coming up with the roadmap. And then we kind of meet once a week, once every 2 weeks, whatever cadence we're on, and we're implementing the roadmap and we're monitoring how that's going before we move on to the next thing, to really kind of like set them up for growth and success.
Few questions. That how long does that relationship like? When do you know that, hey man, you know what? I think the
That's
client
my
is right.
follow-up question.
Okay, okay,
But
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. I will let you take that one. Then I will let you take it.
No, I was gonna say, like, how long is the tenure of you and your clients, or do you see yourself having retaining the same clients over
Yeah,
time?
absolutely. It varies, right? So typically, as we go into a coaching agreement, mentally, we are signed up for 12 months, right? So we say, hey, we're going to work in 12 months, and these 12 months we break down into 90-day cycles. Some clients continue on after that. What I say is, as business owner, when or as coach to a business owner, I'm not here to solve all of your problems. We're coaching you into bigger problems, right? So today I'm worried, man, my team aren't motivated. How do I motivate them to work? Tomorrow the problem is, man, my team is so motivated, they're trying to buy me out. What do I do?
Yeah.
So I've had clients who I've been working with for 4 years. I've had clients who, would do 1 year and they say, thank you very much, this has been great. And they go on themselves, and then anything in between that, So it really varies on what's happening in clients' world, industry after that initial 12-month period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, thanks for that. You talk about relationship. I mean, is that you kept bringing that up. Relationship is very important, especially in Minnesota, right? For immigrants, though, that can be very hard, right? Because if you have a relationship just within your cycle, sometimes those are not the people with the connection or with the resources. But how can you build those? How can you build relationship outside of your cycle, right? And like maybe like in other communities, because sometimes I mean that is so difficult. It's like folks
Yeah.
might say, you know what, you're not one of us, right? Is that we don't want to share even within our own community, right? So no, we don't want to share with each other. But how do you build that relationship? And that's something really difficult for a lot of immigrants.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely right. I think it's about being out there in different circles and really stretching ourselves. Now, look, if I go out there and say, the first time I'm out somewhere, I'm asking lots of questions and trying to get lots of stuff, like that's problematic, right? That's going to be a bit of a turn off for people.
Mhm.
But if I'm genuinely curious about what's happening in different communities, and genuinely have something to offer, whatever my skill set is, whatever my talent is, um, you know, relationships can be built absolutely anywhere. If you have kids and you're limited on time, but you do your kids are in activities and soccer and all of the things, be the coach, be the volunteer, be the one of the parent organizers, right? In that community, because guess what? You meet other parents, you meet other people who may not directly be involved in your world, but they work somewhere who has a connection. You build up an interest in your faith-based organizations, get involved there. I've had some really great kind of relationships start from kind of community faith-based organizations that I've been in. Go out to business networking events. There's a lot, I think we're pretty fortunate here, particularly in the spring, summer months. We have a lot of things happening in St. Paul, in Minnesota. I don't think there's one formula to it, but I think it is getting off your screen and out there into in-person stuff, I think has a massive impact. I think there's a false perception right now that I can build $1 million business in 90 days based on some of the things that I see on my social media feed, right? And therefore the perception is that I can do it from the basement of my house. And you know what? For some people it's worked, but for the vast majority of us, that's not going to be the case.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that. Now.
Yeah, Ali, thank you, man. You just throw some light on scalability because I think that's key. Sometimes you start a business, you have few customers, and you start growing, and then you start losing the key things you started with. So thank you for sharing that. But I want to understand some key success stories from what you've been doing over time because that's very important too, right? What can you share? What are some examples, successful story of immigrant-owned businesses that have been skilled and effectively successful within the community or within their community that you can kind of share with us tonight, just to know, have an idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So actual kind of client stories you're talking to here?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so several. Let me tell you about an IT service-based company, right? Based actually not in Minnesota, but in the States, where he worked in corporate for most of his life in tech support, and wanted to had moved to the States, done his time in corporate, and now wanted to kind of build out this IT service company. When I met him, he had been in business 2 years, I think. He had location number one. He had got it to a point where it was breaking even and kind of starting to getting some profit. And he said, look, within the next year, I want to open up a second location. And therefore we worked together. Within 6 months, he had found location number two, opened up location number two, was operating that, kind of had that going for 1 year, and now focused on location number three 1 year after that. So going to that 0 to 1 mark is often kind of the real kind of lift off. And then once you've been able to do it once, you can often kind of copy and paste. So that's one example. Another example, actually, which this is, by the way, the 4-year client, right? And I think this is the power of the long game, is that it was a property management company in terms of kind of doing, residential properties. At the time, the business was earning him about just over, I think it was about 100, maybe 150K. And it was one of several businesses. It wasn't a sexy business, but it was a business that was on the side doing its thing, and it was having people issues. So that's where we were working with him on. But as we unraveled some of them, we looked at renegotiating contracts, putting in lots of other things. The last year, 2024, that business went from giving him about 100, 150K to actually being a 750K business. And now it's, the next goal is $1 million business, that was never the plan. He actually had other businesses that were doing better than that. This was just like helped with in terms of his portfolio. This has now become his main focus. It was like, I didn't realize what a gem that I was sitting on over here, So the possibilities are real. The possibilities are real. And I've given 2 examples of monetary success.
Yeah.
I think as, immigrants, non-immigrants, monetary is not the only symbol of success, right? There's clients out there who have really helped their own communities, their own immigrant communities, and really have an impact and a legacy that way. And we measure success in terms of the number of households they've been able to impact as well. And I think that's very powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
thank
then,
you.
like,
Just a follow-up question here before you kind of go.
go
So,
ahead,
so
Brandon.
having shared these successful businesses, right? What are some commonalities that these businesses you just mentioned share, like common traits that you can kind of throw light on? The both of them kind of share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think number one is building a business on principles instead of formulas, right? What do I mean by that? Because formulas say, do this, then do this, then do this, and that gets you success. But here's the thing, what gets me success might be different to what gets you success, right?
Okay.
But the principles of business, regardless of the country I'm operating in, regardless of the industry that I'm in, the principles will be very similar, right? So for small businesses, it's around, hey, we can't compete on price. Okay, for vast majority of small businesses, we can't compete on price, right? That's what big corporates are set up to do. What we need to focus on is premium, right? How do we create a premium business? Is that I need somebody to be able to pay me a premium, is that I need to create a business that actually creates customer delight, right? That I am happy to come to you and buy your product or service instead of going to the Costco, Target, Walmart out there where I can get it for half the price, right? So how do we create this premium offering? I think number one. Number two is leadership. How do I create a community of people and take them on that journey with me? Whether that's employees, If I'm a solopreneur, then I'm usually outsourcing things, but I'm generating some sort of kind of movement from a community. Number two. And then number three is consistency of like, it's very easy, not very easy. It's habitual to work in small bursts of energy, and then it kind of fades away because something more exciting comes along. But to be able to be consistent, I think is key. So they're kind of like three principles that we can point to, which I think can really generate small businesses a lot of success.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you talk about consistency, though. That is something that is very, very hard in our communities, right? Immigrant community. Consistency, right? We start something, you talk about that burst of energy. That energy is there. Everyone is thinking of, especially in a social media driven world that we live in these days, right? It's hard. Everyone's right. Once that burst of energy disappears, the consistency falls away. When, what advice we give folks, like struggling with that?
Get a business coach. No, I'm joking.
That was a good one.
That's a good one.
Shameless plug there. I think accountability in whatever form that looks like for you, right? That's part of what business, life, personal training coaches do, right? For those of us who work out, there's a difference when I go to the gym by myself, and there's a difference that when I go to the gym with a friend, a partner, a personal trainer, right? There's a different level of energy that comes. So how can I hold myself accountable? I think number one. Number two, it's human psychology though, right? Like, that's just the way life is. So what I think about is a lot of us set goals for the next year, right? Many of us kind of sat down in January and set our 2025 goals. I like to work with my clients to set those goals, but then work in 90-day cycles, right? And 90-day cycles is like, okay, if my goal is to do this, what does that mean that I need to do for the next 90 days? I pick 3 kind of strategic projects, map them out, know what I'm going to do in each week, right? So that's 12 weeks. This is what I'm doing in week 1, week 2, week 3, whatever. I then get to the next 90 days. And guess what? A lot can happen in 90 days, right? So now it's like, all right, so where am I? Where did I do well? What do I want to continue? Where did I fall short? And actually, what's happened in my industry? What's happened in the world? What's happening in my personal life in terms of that I need to course correct to get to my goals? And then we start again. And another book recommendation, I believe it's called The 90-Day Year. Something like that anyway. But this really talks about kind of like this kind of quarterly planning and running your business and life on these quarterly cycles. I think is very powerful because it's long enough to achieve something, but short enough to like really stay focused.
Okay. Andrea.
You're making some very powerful comments here, Ali.
I hope it's useful for those people who are listening.
Yeah, thanks. One question that I do have is just on the topic of just kind of mindset and like transitioning. I think about, especially our community, African community, there are a lot of folks out there that are like really into like the group home business or wanting to set up like assisted living, facilities. And, I don't think that some of these folks really understand like the magnitude of like work that has to go into it. Like you can't just say, I'm going to open up a group home. There's a lot of like licensures and all these things that happen. So that's just like one example. But what would you say are some common misconceptions that immigrant entrepreneurs have when they make the transition from like going from like a side hustle to an actual business? And how can we set up kind of safeguards so we don't like make some of those same mistakes, that we see sometimes that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I think the challenge immigrant entrepreneurs have when it comes to mindset is actually pretty similar to non-immigrant entrepreneurs, right? We typically expect it to happen faster than it's going to happen. And when it doesn't, we feel really deflated and we take it personally. And the expectation is that we're going to have lots of success and few failures, right? I think we expect there's going to be failures, but we're going to have few failures. And I think the opposite to that script is actually true. It's going to take longer than we expect, and there's going to be more failures than successes, right? Because typically in life, and I think particularly, African community, Indian community where I'm from, right? Like failure is no, right? Like we know what it, well, maybe you guys don't know, but I know what it's like to come home from school and the grades aren't what they should have been, right? From my parents. And it's like, man, this is failure. If I kind of drop out of school, college, uni, that's failure. If that job doesn't work out, like what's with this guy? He's not settled, all of these things, right? And actually in the business world, what happens is typically it's failure, 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 and then success, right? Now, when I say failure, 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 I'm not talking about big failure, but it's like, hey, the client that I thought I was going to land that says no. And then another one says no. And then another one says no. Or the investor that I was convinced was going to give me some money and they say no. And as entrepreneurs, we hear the word no so many times, too much than we should do. And that can be really deflating, right? And we can start to take that personally. But if I know that every time I hear a no or I encounter a failure, it means that I'm closer to the yes, that I'm closer to the success, then that's the perseverance that I need to really keep going. And that doesn't mean we have a false sense of hope. I think we learn from every failure or rejection. Every time a sales call doesn't go well, we sit back and we reflect and we tweak, or an investor call doesn't go well, and we know that this is driving us closer to our yes or the success that we need. Does that answer the question?
Okay, thank you. I mean, thanks for that, Miss B.
So again, I know our folks, they don't like to, they like to act and then ask questions later. So what are you seeing? Like, are you working with folks who are in that ideation stage, or people who have already established, and how long are they in business? Because I know we're talking about scaling, but sometimes people don't understand at what level they're supposed to be at before they're thinking about scaling.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, well, no, I think I work with businesses who are typically, they've launched, they are in a position where they're generating revenue, right? So it's a proven business model. Because once we've got a proven business model and we know there's customers out there willing to buy, then we can think about scaling, right? So that's typically where I come in. Having said, or a business coach like me comes in, right? Because I'm going to help them kind of increase their profits, increase their revenue, and really kind of like take it up another level. Having said that, I think it's important to get support at those different stages, right? And the type of support that I get can be different. And to be honest with you, right, the investment of the support that is going to be different as well, right? For the vast majority of us, when I'm in ideation phase, when I'm in launching phase, right? Money is tight. I don't have a lot of money to spend on business coaches, consultants, mentors. But at that stage, there's lots of resources out there, right? So, for example, an organization that I'm quite actively involved in, SCORE Twin Cities, right, have lots of webinars, have complementary kind of mentoring. They have mentors who have been there in the business world and is open to everybody. So it's really great to tap into that resource, right? Listening to the right podcast, reading the right books, really educating myself is great. Then actually I go into launch phase. At that point, my biggest support is going to be a really good CPA and a really good business attorney, because they're going to help me kind of like navigate that landscape. And then as I go out to market and start selling, is really a good time then to hire consultants, coaches, marketing agencies, sales professionals to really kind of like help us grow.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's great. And that's what we tell folks right in our community, to always tune into the Inner Cycle podcast, because we bring folks like you on here who provide good information, good information, good insights. Your knowledge, you got a wealth of knowledge, so we really appreciate your time here tonight. But tonight, folks, we are discussing from hustle to enterprise, scaling small businesses in immigrant communities, and we have Ali Moledina here giving us some good information. This is a 1 hour show. Ali has been kind of under the weather a little bit, so we'll not take all of his time, right? We'll try to drag this for a little few more, and then we'll try to wrap it up here real quick. But Adi, though, one thing, right, in the immigrant community, the challenges we face is like, we sometimes have like 2 foot in the door, right? We have a side hustle and we're in corporate America. The side hustle might be doing well, but I fear is there. Gosh, I don't want to give up my my stability, right? To go full time here. What would be your advice for folks in that middle?
Yeah, it's not a tough, it's an exciting place to be. I'm going to say it's an exciting place to be because you have that stability, and you have this great thing on the side. I don't think there's any right answer to this, but I think there's two analogies that I can give. And I think as entrepreneurs, we can decide which option or path we're going to take. You can either take the Spider-Man approach, right? The Spider-Man approach is what? When Spider-Man is going from one building to another, what does he do? He's attached to one building. He throws his web to the next building. At that moment in time, he's attached to two buildings, right? One hand's here, one hand's here. And at some point, he decides to leave this building and go on to the next one, right? So you keep this going until you know the security and stability on the other side. And then you make the jump and you go, right? Or there's the Vikings approach. What's the Vikings approach, right? Legend has it when the Vikings used to go to a new land, they would land on that island, and before they go to take over the island and go to battle, they would burn their ships as a sign of, hey, we're here to stay, right? We're not going back to that path, and therefore it was just a straight cut. Like, we have to make this work. There's no other option, right? Honestly, each one of those has its advantages. Each one of those has their risks as well, right? The risk of the first, while it might feel safer, is I never actually make the leap. Or, do you know what? As a human being, I only have limited time and energy, right? If I'm working, have a business, have kids, elderly parents, all the other life stuff, then it's going to be only so long that most of us can do that for. And at some point, we need to make a decision, right? But the benefits is I have that stability. I have the 401k. I have the health insurance, right? And that's important. And we need to consider that. And then the second, the Vikings approach, it's, we go all in. The risk is that it doesn't work out and it's a high risk strategy. But the benefits is like, hey, if I know I have to make this work to pay my mortgage, make my rent payments, do all the things, I've got all of my energy and time to put into this business, and I'll find a way to make it work. It's kind of like, fight or flight mode, I guess you go into, right? I don't think there's one right answer. I think you have to look at your own personal circumstances and decide which is the path you're going to take. I don't know one. I wouldn't recommend it for everyone.
Well, thanks.
I set up my business with a mortgage, two kids, my wife. We homeschool our kids. My wife wasn't working. It was a high risk strategy,
Okay. Well, thanks for that. Well, folks, as I said, it's a 1 hour show. So now we'll get each of our panelists one last question, and then we'll try to wrap it up here with Adi. So Mel, I'll let you, as the male on this partner, I'll let you go first. A good Mel.
All right. My question will be in two. Okay. So the first one basically, with all of those we just said, are there particular industries as it relates to business where an immigrant entrepreneur tend to thrive, and if so, why?
Yeah. So I think the most common example we see, right, of immigrants thriving in their business is twofold, right? So number one is typically, particularly in England where I'm from, it's like the catering, right? Restaurants, things like that. Why? A, we can serve our own communities in terms of the food they miss back home, but B, like, people really appreciate that different kind of taste and cuisine, and they can really bring their culture to that environment, particularly where we live in a world where, people like to eat out and have that experience. Immigrants can really give that experience, right? So I think we've seen that wherever you go in the world, like, immigrants have done a really good job there. And second of all, Andrea, spoke about it in terms of often we'll look at what are people in our community already doing well in. And because we've seen that role modeled for us, we can often replicate that or get the support. So I think Andrea, you spoke about, in the African community, assisted living facilities, right? In the Indian community, you'll see kind of like hotels or real estate investments happening often. So I think that can kind of really vary, but it is based on what I've seen role model to do really well in the past. Is typically the path we'll see other people go down.
But
Thank
doesn't
you.
that limit if folks just I mean just a minute here, right? Is folk everyone kind of maybe going to the catering or going to the assisted living or maybe going to the hotel or things like that? Doesn't that limit like maybe innovation maybe like spreading out, right? For because I mean like America, right? A lot of opportunities, right? If we all just want to do group home or assisted living, there are a
Yeah.
lot of other opportunities out there.
Hey, absolutely, and so I think it's natural, right? It's natural. Why? Because as an immigrant, I'm on often survival mode for the first few years, and I'm going to do the things. Remember, we talked about kind of reducing risk. Like, it's one way of reducing risk is when I know that it works, and if that's all I'm seeing, or that's what I'm seeing, then I'm going to want to replicate that, right? In England, where I'm from, pharmacists and opticians, big in the Indian communities. We see that happen all the time. And you're right, when we get to second, third generation immigrants, what we typically see is now they go down a different path and they do different things because the resources are there, the stability is there, they have the intergenerational wealth to play with. And we see that. I think a gift that immigrants have, though, is that we see the world differently to most people that we're
Mm,
surrounded by,
yeah.
right? Like, you can almost live in America and be an observer and a participant at the same time, right? And I think that's really powerful as an entrepreneur. If we can bring that to the table and make bold decisions to do something different, then I think, that can be a source of real power. And we see
Yeah.
that's where some of the best businesses are built, right? When
Yeah.
they see those gaps.
Wow, that's powerful. Mel, go ahead with your last
Yeah.
question.
Thank you, Ali. You named two books here tonight. The first one you said key person of influence that I got. The second one I'm trying to get. You said 90 days yacht or what? Please, could you just
Yeah, and I don't know the exact title, but something like the 90-day year, right? If you Google it, it should come up with the exact title. But it's basically a book that talks about how to plan your business, your life in these 90-day cycles, as
okay?
opposed to like 12 months that typically most people do. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Andrea, your last question or two questions like Mel or three questions, whatever. Just messing with you. Just messing with
I'll,
you.
I'll stick with one question. Well, first off, Ali, thank you again for your time and dropping gems. One question that it's more so to kind of help our audience out there. So I've learned just in my entrepreneurial journey that like I'm so good at different things, right? Strategy, planning, even all these things that I've had to kind of hone in on, like taking some of that and making it like money out of it. For the folks that are out there that are doing all these hustles and stuff like that, what advice would you give to them to really kind of like hone in on their skills and that actually, like, I don't want to say scale, but like kind of more formalize it to actually being a business versus kind of just chipping away at it little by little? I don't know if that makes sense, but
Can you help me understand the question? Sorry.
yeah. So like, for example, so I have a couple of different businesses, and for a long time, like I was just doing a lot of different things. And then at some point I was like, okay, I really need to like work, like settle down and kind of focus on one thing. And I had to like find my market niche. Like, for example, like one of my businesses, I sell African inspired gifts and accessories, right? From families from Ghana have access to goods. I can sew, I can do all these things. There are a ton of people in Minnesota doing the same thing, doing the traditional stuff. But I had to figure out how to differentiate myself so that I could really hone in on my target market. And I don't necessarily worry about that. I get people saying, oh, don't you worry because you're next to so and so and they're selling the same thing. No, because I pick all my fabric. I have people on the ground. I sell things that I would actually wear. You know what I mean? So I'm more kind of getting at like, how can you help our community kind of like really hone in like on their skills or really like hyper focus on their business to really pick it up off the ground? Because I feel like I meet so many people, but they're doing so many different things, and I feel like it's hard to like really organize kind of their thoughts and really like focusing on their market niche and how to move that forward. I don't know if that
Yeah.
helps.
No, absolutely. No, I
I can
that.
and Abby, before you go, I can just clarify that for you, right? It's like the thing in our community, right? Like anything that you hear someone is doing is successful, you want to jump into it, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the thing. If you think like maybe like come back to the nursing home or to the assisted living, if that's successful, even though I'm doing something else, I want to jump into it. So it's like where is the focus, right? Where can some is like as immigrants sometimes anything that makes money want to jump into it, right? Or
Yeah.
where do we draw that line to have a focus? Is it the what? Let me focus here. Let me bring my skills to this thing and put all of my, weight into it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great question. And I think so. I think that's it, right? Having the self-awareness of like, what is my skill? What is the thing that either I'm really good at or passionate about, right? So that's one. And like, how do I monetize that, right? Is the key thing of, so how can I package this up in a way that actually people will want to buy it? So I think that's step one. Step number two, I think what every person should be good at is and learn is selling, right? We need to learn how to sell. I think that sometimes there's this perception that selling is dirty. We feel awkward about it. It doesn't feel great. And yet, like I have to be a salesperson before I'm an entrepreneur. Because if I don't know how to sell, then guess what? I don't have a business, right? So if there's one skill, so you talked about it in terms of these African products that you sell, there's a great example of a water company who, water is water at the end of the day, right? But there are several water companies, and one of the most successful ones, they had this whole messaging around how their water comes from volcanoes and the process they use to make it really pure. And guess what? It's the same process that every other water company uses, right? But just because they're able to talk about it in a way that makes it exciting, really saw their sales kind of like drive up, right? So I think it's that having the ability, whatever you land on, having the ability to sell and the confidence to sell is going to be the key thing, and we are selling, we're being sold to all the time, and that's a skill that I think everyone should be developing in order to really build successful businesses.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that. Ms. B, your last question.
My question is, what is how important is continuing education as an entrepreneur, and what would you consider things that can be considered as continuing education for entrepreneurs? As you know, if I'm a teacher, I can go somewhere. If I'm working in a corporate, I can go somewhere. But as an entrepreneur, what are things that you think of is important as far as continuing education? And then what's the assignment you want to give people today? If they are the solo entrepreneur, they've been in business for 10 years, what is an assignment you could give them, or what's an action you would give them?
Thank you very much. Two great questions. So the continuing education piece, I think we all need to do what's slowly becoming a lost art, and start picking up one of these or whatever it is, and reading, and getting knowledge. I think once I qualified as a chartered accountant, I pretty much done a degree that didn't serve me very well. I became qualified that didn't serve me very well, and I promised myself that I would only ever sit another exam if I was genuinely interested in that topic, not just to make me money, right? But I think continuous education comes in skilling ourselves up, reading books, right? Whether that's self-development books, whether that's business books. There's that saying of you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most amount of time with, right? I think, we can extend that to the podcasts you listen to, the books you read, the shows that you watch, right? You can spend an evening watching Netflix or some kind of stuff on Netflix, or you can listen to a podcast doing this, right? You can drive in your car and blast some music, which is going to be a lot of fun, or you can listen to an audio book and gain some knowledge. And I think the investment in myself that I make in terms of knowledge and then being able to apply that is, number one of the most powerful things we can do. And number two, to be honest with you, is being stolen a little bit by kind of like more short form content kind of consumption, which just doesn't have the depth and just doesn't have that power. So I think it's a great question. I live by a philosophy that was taught to me when I was younger. We seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave, and I think it keeps us young as well. It keeps us driven the more we're learning. So that's that. Hopefully that answers that question, and that's why I've been dropping a lot of books names, by the way, because
That's great.
something that I'm a big believer in. And then to answer your next question, Miss B, I think it's a great question, and I appreciate it. Because if we don't take any action from what we listen to, then or read, what's the point? And I'm going to take the conversation back full circle, right? The first conversation we had is like, what's the starting point to building a business? And I said, project out to the future. What's the kind of life you want to lead? And that's your starting point. So here's the assignment to anybody that's willing to do this. And I invite all of you to do this, is project what your life is going to look like in 5 years' time. So 2030, right? And come up with a really detailed description of what that looks like. And then get a pen and paper and write a letter to yourself and say, Dear Miss B, it is now 2020, now 2030. Congratulations and well done on achieving ... and whatever it is you're looking to achieve in your professional life, your business, your personal life. Talk about what you're doing, talk about what your day looks like, talk about some of the obstacles that you had to go through in order to achieve that, and sign that off from your future self, and take that letter and read it every morning or 2-3 times a week or however often that you can, and ground yourself to that.
Man, Ali, right there,
That
right?
was priceless.
I think right, whatever question I had to close this, right? I gotta let it go, right? I gotta leave it at
Yes.
that, right? I
Yes.
gotta leave it at that because that's powerful, right? That's deep, right? It's like, so I mean that's a mark job right there, right? That's a mark job. And so we really, really appreciate you, Adi. You really like thank you so much for pouring into us tonight, sharing your knowledge with us, with your kind clarity and challenging us to push into, and to think bigger, right? And the mark job you just did, man, that was deep, and I hope folks will take that. I'm gonna write that letter to myself. So
I'm gonna hold you all accountable to write
Yeah,
that letter.
I'm gonna write
you
that
got to
letter to
share it.
myself.
You got to
Yeah,
share it.
definitely. I'm definitely gonna write that letter. That's powerful. So, folks, buddy, man, thank you so much. I mean, anything else you want to say to our audience before before we let you go?
I'm going to say one thing, Abe, just on that. So
Yeah.
I do this exercise once a year in May. May is my birthday. I do this exercise. I encourage my clients to do this exercise. I don't have it in front of me, but the second time I done this exercise was in May 2023. May 2020, right? Let's remind ourselves of what was happening in May 2020, right? COVID, right? We had the George Floyd incident that had just happened, right?
Yeah.
I had just moved to Minnesota the year before, new to the community and stuff. I wrote a letter to myself saying, congratulations and well done on the coaching firm that you had built in the US. 2020 was a horrendous year, all of the things. And I wrote, congratulations on well done on creating a coaching firm that helps minority-owned business owners grow their business and making Minneapolis a fairer place to live, right? And here we are in 2025 on this podcast. I never knew any of you in 2020, but things have been happening, right? And this is not me kind of blowing my own trumpet, but a testimony to how powerful that I think these things are when we do these activities, right? So I'm not gonna advise stuff that I don't do myself or get my clients to do. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Well, thank you so much, Ali. It's been great talking to you. It's been great chatting with you. We hope you can make this your home, right? Inner Cycle Podcast. We try to bring information like this to our community, and the information, your knowledge you shared with us tonight was very, very powerful. Thank you so much for what you do for the immigrant community. thank you for everything you do for the state of Minnesota. We really, really appreciate you. So thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
very much for having me. This has honestly been a pleasure and an honor. So I appreciate all of you.
Yeah. Thank you. You have a good night. Yeah. Well,
Good night, everyone.
Yeah. Our show tonight, man, it was a good one, right? So there's nothing I can say here anymore. Let's say that. So Adi, good night and good night to all of our panelists, and we'll see you all tomorrow. We're going to be back here with Representative Maria Essa. So thank you so much, folks. You have a good night.
Community strong, we're never alone. Together as one, we've created a home. So join the conversation, let's set the tone. In a circle podcast where love